Growing calls for Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, to keep Archie and Lily, for William and Catherine to let Lily and Archie in, given the very weird way that they have been raised by Harry and Meghan in Montecito. Watch this.
The palace has gone silent, and in royal circles, silence is never nothing. It is a decision. Right now, behind the centuries-old walls of Buckingham Palace and Lambeth Palace, something extraordinary is happening. A comprehensive classified review of official documents, birth records, legal filings, baptismal certificates, all connected to two small children named Archie and Lilibet Sussex. Children who, by virtue of their grandfather ascending to the throne, carry the titles of Prince and Princess. But those titles? They may be living on borrowed time. Tonight, we are pulling back the curtain on what insiders are now calling one of the most sensitive internal investigations the modern monarchy has ever quietly conducted. A review so delicate, so legally explosive, that even those closest to the crown are speaking only in whispers. Stay with us, because before this video ends, you will understand why the question is no longer whether William will act. It is when. The paradox that started it all. Let's start at the beginning. Not with birth certificates or legal filings or disappearing doctors. Let's start with the one question that nobody in the Sussex camp has ever been able to satisfactorily answer, the contradiction so glaring, so fundamentally incompatible with the story they have spent years constructing, that it has become the crack through which everything else has begun to flood. Why would two people who spent years publicly denouncing the British monarchy as a racist, soul-crushing, psychologically destructive institution fight, tooth and nail, across multiple continents and legal jurisdictions to ensure their children bear the titles of that very institution? Think about that for a moment. Really sit with it. In Spare, Prince Harry described an upbringing defined by genetic pain. He wrote about being trapped as the spare to the heir, caught in a centuries-old system built on hierarchy, suffering, and silence. Meghan, in their 6-part Netflix documentary, painted an even darker portrait, describing a cold, unfeeling machine that drove her to the brink of suicide and responded to her desperate pleas for help with bureaucratic indifference. These are not mild criticisms. These are devastating, deeply personal condemnations of an institution. If you believed even half of what was described, and millions of people around the world did, then the logical conclusion would be clear. You leave and you don't look back. You shed everything connected to that institution. You build something entirely new. And yet, when Queen Elizabeth II passed and King Charles III ascended to the throne, something shifted almost overnight. Under letters patent established by King George V in 1917, the grandchildren of a reigning monarch are automatically entitled to the titles of Prince or Princess and the style of His or Her Royal Highness. And rather than declining those titles, rather than saying, as their entire brand would logically demand, "No thank you, our children belong to themselves, not to this institution we have condemned," the Sussex camp quietly accepted them. More than that, they announced them. Archie Harrison, Mountbatten Windsor, formerly styled as Master Archie, became Prince Archie of Sussex. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known simply by her name, became Princess Lilibet of Sussex. And here is the question the internet has not stopped asking since. If the monarchy is a prison, why are you hanging the prison's crest above your children's beds? Ask yourself this, because the palace has been asking it too. The answer some constitutional experts have settled on is uncomfortable but unavoidable. The titles are not sentimental, they are commercial. In the global marketplace of celebrity, influence, and brand value, the designation of prince or princess is worth an incalculable sum. It opens doors, it commands rooms, it justifies $100 million media deals with Netflix and Spotify and publishing houses. Without those titles, the Sussex brand loses its most powerful and irreplaceable asset, the legitimacy borrowed from the very institution they publicly reject. Piers Morgan, one of the most vocal critics of the Sussex narrative, has framed this not as personal animosity, but as a matter of national policy. And on this specific point, constitutional scholars have found themselves in rare agreement with him. A royal title is not an inheritance in the traditional sense. It is not a piece of property passed down like land or money. It is a contract. It carries with it an obligation of lifelong public service, representing the crown, supporting the state, sacrificing personal ambition to the needs of the institution. Princess Anne understood this deeply when she made the deliberate, principled decision not to give her children royal titles. Zara Tyndall, née Phillips, has no title. Neither does her brother Peter. And what has resulted? Two individuals who have built genuine lives of accomplishment and earned public respect on their own terms. Zara is a world champion equestrian. They are private citizens who live with integrity. Harry and Meghan, sources inside the palace say, want something else entirely. They want the independence of private individuals while retaining the dignity and commercial firepower of senior royals. And as Queen Elizabeth II made absolutely clear in the months before her passing, that arrangement is not on offer. You are either in or you are out. There is no halfway house. The palace, it appears, has reached the same conclusion. The paper trail and the gaps within it. Now we come to the part of this story that goes beyond the philosophical, beyond questions of hypocrisy and brand strategy and constitutional theory. We come to the cold, hard question of paperwork. And in the British monarchy, an institution built across 1,000 years on the foundation of documented tradition, paperwork is everything. Since 1837, the birth of a royal child in the United Kingdom has been announced through a formal bulletin, framed and placed upon a gilded easel outside Buckingham Palace. This is not merely charming pageantry. It is constitutional theatre with profound legal weight. The notification is signed by the attending royal physicians, medical professionals appointed and trusted by the Crown, and those signatures serve as the official guarantee to the British state and the British public that the child was born from the body of the mother in question. When Prince George was born, the bulletin was signed. When Princess Charlotte came along, the bulletin was signed. When Prince Louis arrived, the bulletin was signed. These are not bureaucratic formalities. They are the foundational legal documents through which a child's place in the succession is formally established. In May 2019, when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor entered the world, the bulletin appeared on the easel as tradition demanded. But the spaces where the physician's signatures should have been? Empty. Let that sink in. For the first time in living memory, in a birth directly connected to the line of succession, the medical verification that had been standard, non-negotiable practice for decades was simply absent. No signatures, no certification, no official medical seal. The Sussex camp offered no explanation that satisfied constitutional observers. Privacy was cited. But as critics were quick to point out, privacy and secrecy are not the same thing. And for a child whose parents would later insist on his recognition as a prince, the absence of the very documentation that confirms royal birth was not a minor omission. It was, in the eyes of many who study these things, a foundational crack in the legal architecture. That crack widened 1 month after the birth, when something happened that constitutional lawyers describe as almost without precedent. The birth certificate was amended. Meghan's given names, Rachel Meghan, were removed from the section listing the mother, replaced only with her formal title, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. When pressed for an explanation, the Sussex team claimed this was a directive from the palace, a requirement to align with royal convention. But palace sources moved quickly to contradict that claim, briefing media outlets that the change had in fact been requested by the couple themselves. A legal document, amended after the fact, with two directly conflicting public explanations from the two parties most directly involved. The question this raised was not subtle. Why would anyone alter a birth certificate after it has been officially registered? Under what circumstances does a parent decide that the name on their child's legal record of birth needs to change? No clear answer has ever been given. Not then. Not now. Then came Lilibet. Born in California in June 2021, the second Sussex child arrived into a very different documentation landscape. There was no gilded easel. There was no palace notification. There was no involvement from any member of the royal medical household. The news of her birth was disseminated not through any official institutional channel, but through the couple's American PR operation, a press release distributed to sympathetic media. The constitutional implications of this are significant. The British monarchy has processes, centuries-old, painstakingly maintained processes, specifically designed to verify, authenticate, and formally record the births of those who carry royal standing. When a birth bypasses those processes entirely, when no official institution observes or certifies the event, a question mark is placed over the child's standing that cannot simply be waved away by a press release, however warmly worded. And then there was the doctor. In the state of California, the physician who delivers a baby is required by law to be named in the public birth record. The name of the doctor reportedly present at Lilibet's birth became known relatively quickly. She was a respected, highly regarded practitioner at a prestigious Santa Barbara hospital. She had a thriving practice. She was, by all accounts, at the height of her professional career. 2 weeks after the birth, she closed her entire medical practice. Abruptly. Completely. No gradual wind down, no announcement of retirement, no transition of patients. Simply gone. In any other context, this might be dismissed as coincidence, a personal decision, a life change. In the world of royal reporting, where those who write most carefully about the monarchy have learned that there are no true coincidences when they cluster around events of this magnitude, the sudden and total professional disappearance of the physician present at the birth of a royal princess has not been forgotten. We are not here to trade in speculation, but we are here to ask the question that the palace is now, according to multiple sources, asking itself with considerable urgency: is everything in order? The signs suggest the answer may not be the reassuring one the palace hoped to find. The ghost christening. If a birth certificate is the legal foundation of a royal existence, a baptism is its constitutional and spiritual roof. This is not a ceremonial nicety. In the unique structure of the British state, the monarch is not only head of government, but supreme governor of the Church of England, the defender of the faith. That title is not honorary. It reflects a constitutional reality in which church and state are intertwined in ways that have no parallel in any other modern democracy. And within that framework, children born into the direct line of succession are expected to be formally initiated into the Anglican faith through a christening, a ceremony observed, recorded, and preserved by the Church itself. This is the holy thread that binds a future possible sovereign to the nation they may one day serve. Prince George was christened at the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, in a ceremony attended by senior royals and overseen by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The records are complete, formal, and unambiguous. The same is true of Princess Charlotte, of Prince Louis. The institutional machinery rolled forward as it has done for generations. In March 2023, the Sussex communications team announced that Lilibet Diana had been baptized. The ceremony, they said, had taken place privately at the couple's Montecito home. It had been conducted, they reported, by the Bishop of Los Angeles, a cleric of the American Episcopal Church, which is part of the wider Anglican communion. On the surface, this sounded plausible. Unconventional, certainly, but plausible. And then people started checking. Constitutional researchers and royal correspondents did what any rigorous journalist does when presented with an official claim. They sought corroboration. They contacted the relevant authorities, the office of the Archbishop of Canterbury at Lambeth Palace, the central archives of the Church of England, the office of the Chapel Royal, where royal baptismal records are maintained. What they found, or more precisely, what they did not find, has become one of the most discussed anomalies in this entire controversy. There is no formal entry in the baptismal records kept at the Chapel Royal for Princess Lilibet Diana. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the same Justin Welby who presided over the wedding of Harry and Meghan, who joined their hands together in the most sacred ritual of Anglican life, has never issued any formal recognition of the Montecito ceremony. In the eyes of the British state and the Church of England, Lilibet's baptism exists in press releases and sympathetic media coverage, but in the official ledgers, the ones that actually matter constitutionally, it is, for all practical purposes, a phantom event. Now let us consider what this means at a deeper level. The Act of Settlement of 1701, one of the foundational statutes that governs the British monarchy, is unequivocal on this point. Those in the line of succession must receive communion from the Church of England. If a child's baptism is not formally recognized by the Church of England, their position in the succession does not simply become questionable. It becomes legally precarious in ways that cannot be resolved by a statement from a publicist. The monarchy, as an institution, cannot function in a state of constitutional ambiguity. When it comes to the validity of a possible future successor, however distant that possibility may be, the word probably is not acceptable. The word apparently is not acceptable. The institution demands certainty because the alternative is a destabilizing fog that its enemies, both domestic and international, will exploit for generations. Justin Welby's silence on this matter is, in the view of many observers, more eloquent than any statement he could have made. The man who pronounced Harry and Meghan husband and wife, who should logically be the natural voice of endorsement for the spiritual legitimacy of their children's place in the church, has said nothing, not a word of formal recognition, not a brief note of acknowledgement. That silence has been read in the corridors of power in London as a signal, faint, carefully maintained, but unmistakable, that at the highest levels of the church, there is genuine disquiet about what has happened. Some palace insiders have offered a particularly sharp reading of the invitation that was reportedly extended to King Charles, Queen Camilla, and William and Catherine to attend the private Montecito ceremony. These insiders interpret it not as a genuine gesture of reconciliation and inclusion, but as a strategic move, an attempt to draw the senior royals into validating a ceremony that deliberately circumvented every established protocol. They were always going to decline, and their refusal could then be framed in the Sussex media ecosystem as yet another instance of royal coldness and exclusion. Whether or not that reading is correct, the net result remains the same. The ceremony has no official standing in the eyes of the institution, whose recognition it would require to carry constitutional weight. And inside Buckingham Palace and Lambeth Palace, the question that was once whispered is now being asked directly, formally, and with considerable urgency. What exactly do these records show? And what happens if the answer is not satisfactory? William draws his line. Now we turn to the man who is most directly affected by all of this, the man who will one day wear the crown, the man for whom the long Sussex saga has transformed from a deeply personal family wound into what sources describe as an existential question of institutional survival, Prince William, the Prince of Wales. For years, William has maintained a public silence on the Sussex situation that has been mistaken by some commentators for passivity or indifference. It is neither. Those who know him describe a man who has watched with growing resolve, watching the Sussex brand be built on the rubble of his family's reputation, watching his late grandmother's legacy be weaponized for commercial gain, watching a global media narrative take shape in which he and his wife are cast as the villains of a story whose facts he profoundly disputes. He has read Spare. He has watched the Netflix documentary. He has seen the allegations about racism, about institutional cruelty, about his own conduct in private conversations, reach audiences of tens of millions. And through all of it, he has said almost nothing publicly. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he understands something that his brother appears not to, that in the long game of institutional survival, silence is often the most devastating weapon. But the silence, according to those closest to the Prince of Wales, is entering its final chapter. There is something important to understand about how William has been shaped by the last decade. He watched his father navigate the impossible terrain of the Camilla years, the Diana years, the years when the monarchy's approval ratings fell to historic lows and serious voices in Parliament began questioning whether it had a future at all. He watched the institution absorb the crisis, adapt, and endure, not because it was beloved in those dark years, but because it was resolute, because the people at its center refused to allow personal chaos to become institutional collapse. He watched his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, embody that resolution for 7 decades. She buried her private feelings about Andrew, about the Waleses, about the Sussex departure, beneath an absolute commitment to the institution she had sworn her life to protect. She never complained. She never explained. She simply served. And when she died, the world mourned in a way that confirmed, more powerfully than any poll ever could, that the institution she had given her life to still mattered. William carries all of that. It is in him the way the institution itself is in him, not as a performance, but as a conviction. The question of titles, his children's titles, the dukedom of Sussex, the commercial architecture built on borrowed royal prestige, is now, in William's view, a matter of constitutional integrity rather than family feeling. This shift is significant. When it was a family matter, it was complex, painful, and resistant to clean resolution. When it becomes a constitutional matter, the tools available are entirely different, more precise, more powerful, and considerably less sentimental. Multiple senior sources within the palace have indicated with increasing directness that the question of stripping Harry and Meghan of their titles is no longer a matter of whether. It is a matter of when and how. William is reported to be reviewing precedent carefully, and the most relevant precedent is not a historical one. It is recent, and its logic is hard to argue with. When Prince Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein became a full-scale crisis for the monarchy, the institution acted with a swiftness and ruthlessness that surprised many observers. Andrew lost his military honors. He lost the style of His Royal Highness. The message from the crown was clear and unambiguous. Titles are not personal possessions immune to consequence. They can be removed, and they will be removed when the conduct of those who hold them poses an existential risk to the institution. He understood its logic, and sources suggest he has drawn a direct conceptual line between Andrew's situation and the Sussex one, not in terms of the nature of the offense, but in terms of the principle. A title that is being used to damage and commercially exploit the institution that conferred it cannot remain unchallenged indefinitely. But it is the question of Archie and Lilibet's titles that sources describe as the most explosive element of the entire situation. If Harry and Meghan lose their ducal titles, the status of their children becomes the next point of focus. And it is here that the investigation now taking place. The quiet, systematic review of documentation described by sources close to the palace becomes directly relevant. William is reportedly deeply uncomfortable with the notion of 2 children, raised thousands of miles from Britain, with no connection to the country, no public service record, no official governmental role, carrying the titles of Prince and Princess, titles that their parents have actively marketed in a foreign country as part of a commercial brand that exists, at least in part, to undermine the institution from which those titles derive. There is another dimension to this discomfort that speaks to something beyond politics or constitutionality. Some of those around William have raised the question of what it actually means for Archie and Lilibet themselves to carry these titles in the lives they are living. Growing up in California, outside the royal bubble, outside the institutional framework that gives those titles their context and meaning, they will be subject to a level of global scrutiny and public fascination that no amount of Montecito privacy can insulate them from. And they will be carrying the weight of titles connected to an institution and a country they have no functional relationship with. The argument, from this angle, is almost counterintuitively protective. Removing the titles might actually serve the children's interests, freeing them to build lives of genuine private accomplishment rather than existing in a permanently ambiguous royal limbo. It is the path Princess Anne chose for her children, and Zara Tindall, champion equestrian and widely admired public figure, has never once appeared to suffer for the absence of a royal title. The investigation, the stakes, and the point of no return. Here is where we bring everything together. Because what is happening right now, if the sources are accurate and they are coming from multiple directions, is not a family disagreement being played out in the tabloid press. It is a formal, institutional reckoning. The palace is conducting an assessment, not publicly, not with press releases or briefings to royal correspondents, quietly, methodically, in the way that institutions with 1,000 years of muscle memory conduct their most sensitive internal reviews, behind closed doors, through constitutional lawyers and senior courtiers, with the full weight of a legal apparatus that most people never see and rarely understand. The documents under review, birth records, official filings, baptismal registers, legal amendments, are being examined with a precision that the Sussex camp, insulated in California and accustomed to operating through PR machinery rather than constitutional scrutiny, may not be prepared for. And the questions being asked are not small ones. Were the standard verification processes followed for both children's births? Why were the royal physician's signatures absent from Archie's birth announcement? Who authorized the subsequent amendment to his birth certificate? And on whose instruction is the baptism of Princess Lilibet formally recognized in the official records of the Church of England? If not, what are the constitutional implications for her position in the line of succession? These are not questions that can be answered with a press statement from a Montecito communications office. They require answers that exist or do not exist in official ledgers and legal documents that have been maintained by the British state for generations. Consider for a moment what the palace's options actually are, because this is where the stakes become viscerally real. If the documentation review comes back clean, the palace has two paths: quietly close the investigation and continue the current uneasy standoff, or use the review's conclusions as the basis for a formal restructuring of how the Sussex titles are held and exercised. If, on the other hand, the review surfaces irregularities that cannot be satisfactorily explained, gaps in the official record, inconsistencies that no retroactive press statement can paper over, the palace will find itself in possession of both the legal standing and the institutional necessity to act in ways that would reshape the Sussex story permanently. This is not hypothetical. The machinery is already in motion. And once that machinery begins to turn inside an institution like the British monarchy, it does not stop for sentiment. There is also a broader audience watching this unfold that rarely gets mentioned in the coverage: the British public. Polling has consistently shown that while sympathy for Harry and Meghan exists in pockets of the population, the majority of British people have grown weary of the Sussex brand's dual posture, claiming victimhood at the hands of an institution while simultaneously cashing in on everything that institution represents. The public understands, in its bones, the concept of earning your keep, and the sight of two people living in an 8-bedroom California estate issuing declarations about royal trauma via Netflix and Spotify, while their children are styled as prince and princess of a country they have never served. It grates. It grates in a way that no amount of sympathetic American media coverage can fully smooth over. William knows this. He is not a king yet, but he reads the public with a precision that his years of preparation have sharpened considerably. He knows that when he eventually acts, and those around him believe that action is now a matter of timing, not decision, the British public will not be shocked. They will not be outraged. Many of them will simply nod and think, yes, it was always going to come to this. The timing of all this matters too. Harry's much-discussed attempts at reconciliation with his brother have, according to sources, produced nothing of substance. William's response to the overtures has been, by design, silence. And that silence is not the silence of a wounded brother hoping for healing. It is the silence of a future king who has concluded that the time for personal solutions to an institutional problem has passed. Constitutional lawyers are involved. Senior courtiers are involved. And according to well-placed sources, King Charles himself, navigating the dual pressures of a father's instinct and a king's duty, is part of the deliberation. The final decision will not be made on the basis of family feeling. It will be made on the basis of law, tradition, and the long-term security of the institution. Charles knows this, William knows this, and the Sussex camp, however loudly their media allies may continue to defend them, surely knows this too. What is the endgame? If the documentation review reveals significant irregularities, gaps in verification, unanswered questions about official records, the palace will have both the legal basis and the institutional justification to act decisively. The children's titles could be formally reviewed. In an extreme scenario, a new letters patent could be issued that redefines the criteria under which those titles are held. a mechanism the Crown has used before and can use again. Harry and Meghan's own titles, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, are potentially subject to a separate process, one that mirrors the action taken against Prince Andrew, should the palace determine that the commercial exploitation of those titles is causing sufficient damage to the institution to justify their removal. None of this is inevitable. The palace moves slowly when it moves by choice, and quickly when circumstances demand urgency. But the fact that this review is reportedly happening at all, the fact that sources inside the institution are characterizing it as a comprehensive assessment of the Sussex children's documentation, tells you something important about where the relationship between the palace and its most controversial former senior royals now stands. It tells you that patience in those ancient rooms has run out. Closing. Here is what we know for certain. The British monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years, not because it is immune to crisis, but because it knows how to absorb crisis, adapt, and endure. Every generation has presented its challenges. Every decade has had its moments where the institution seemed to teeter. But the monarchy has a mechanism for dealing with those who would exploit its prestige without honoring its obligations. It has used that mechanism before, and the signs, accumulating with remarkable speed over recent months, suggest it is preparing to use it again. Archie and Lilibet are small children. They did not choose this situation. They did not ask to be born into a conflict between their parents and an institution half a world away. Whatever happens to their titles, they carry no personal responsibility for the circumstances that have led to this moment. That point bears saying clearly and without equivocation. But the monarchy does not have the luxury of sentiment when constitutional integrity is at stake. The Crown must protect itself, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. And the cold reality is that titles carrying the weight of a 1,000-year institution cannot be treated as lifestyle accessories, available for commercial use on a California estate, while their holders simultaneously position themselves as victims of the very system that conferred them. William understands this. More than anyone, he understands what it means to be the steward of something larger than yourself, something you do not own but hold in trust for the generations that will follow. The question he is now grappling with may be the most consequential of his life before he ever reaches the throne. How you protect an institution that someone you love is actively working to undermine. How you balance the duty of a king against the love of a brother. According to those closest to him, he has found his answer, and the Sussex camp, still issuing press releases from Montecito, may be the last to understand what is coming. The people watching this story unfold, and there are hundreds of millions of them, are not watching a soap opera. They are watching an institution write the next chapter of a history that will be studied for centuries. They are watching a future king decide what kind of monarchy he will inherit and what kind he will leave behind. The investigation is quiet, the walls are high, but inside those walls, the last chapter is being written. And this time, when the palace speaks, it will not be in whispers. Tell us in the comments, do you think William is right to push for this? Should Archie and Lilibet keep their titles regardless of what their parents have done? Drop your thoughts below. This conversation is just getting started.